Welcome on into the Utah Blockcast. I'm Steve Bartle, Utah Insider for KFB Sports. On this episode, we're going to be reacting to the college football playoff ranking, as well as going to be joined by Jon Kirby of Jayhawk Slant, website covering Kansas Jayhawks football and basketball on the On3 Rivals Network. Jon thought Jon provided some really good insight into the Kansas Jayhawks program, and that's going to be an interesting one for the Utes this weekend. Obviously, a Friday morning game, which is going to be another interesting layer to this game. But I thought Jon did a good job of providing insight into the Jayhawks and kind of giving his feel and thoughts on the matchup as well. So I think Utah going into this one is the heavy favorite. And I think Jon's comments really kind of only lead you to believe in Utah taking care of business a little bit more. So yeah, I think that's a valuable listen. So big shout out to Jon for hopping on with me. All right, so with Utah's Week 14 college football playoff ranking coming in at number 13. I think to the surprise of no one, Miami jumping Utah into that number 12 spot. Yeah, that's certainly a conversation that should be hashed out. When you look at, Utah's resume, you compare the two between Utah and Miami, some pretty tough losses there for Miami. A lot of unranked, I think all of them actually are unranked opponents. Most of whom, the Big 12 knocked off as well. I think, was it SMU lost to Baylor and TCU, and Pitt potentially this weekend. You lose to them. They lost to West Virginia. I'm blanking on who the other one is, but yeah, it's an interesting conversation. Obviously, Miami has the Notre Dame win, but Utah, let's keep in mind, they had 2 top 25 wins at the time of game, which is, oh my God. But you go back to those games, Utah had a top 25 win against Arizona State. They had a top 25 win against Cincinnati. So they've got 2 of them there. They still have Arizona State in the top 20. And that's actually really important for Utah, right? Because the biggest argument against Utah's best win, which is that Arizona State win, is the fact that they did it without Sam Leavitt. Well, what has Jeff Sims done since then? He's continued to lead Arizona State to wins, and they're top 20 ranked. So big opportunity this weekend for the Sun Devils in that rivalry game against Arizona. And Utah fans, you should be rooting for Arizona State in that one, because it helps again with your resume and your best win. So and it just, again, it diminishes the argument that Utah destroyed Arizona State without Sam Leavitt, because Jeff Sims just continues to lead the Sun Devils to victory. So beyond that, Utah obviously has to take care of business this weekend against Kansas. First and foremost, everybody knows that. That's duh. But you're going to need a lot of chaos this weekend. And in the top 25, there's actually a lot of opportunity for chaos to happen this weekend. Obviously there's the big rivalry game, Ohio State, Michigan. That one you're going to need Ohio State to win, and probably, to make it easier on Utah, you probably want Ohio State to win by a comfortable margin. Michigan is a threat from behind Utah. If they add that win over Ohio State, that's a pretty significant win for the Wolverines. So, Utah fans, your Buckeye fans this weekend, because you want to eliminate that threat. Similar story with Texas A&M taking on Texas at number 16. Gig 'em, Then you've got Georgia and Georgia Tech. Again, you're looking for Georgia to take care of business there. Obviously, with Texas Tech, we've hashed out the Big 12 title game scenario, and you would need Texas Tech to lose to West Virginia. You would need BYU to win. You would need a couple other things in that scenario for Utah to punch their ticket. Regardless, if we're talking about an at-large bid for Utah, and that being more of the priority, you're actually probably rooting for Texas Tech. So yeah, I think that's an interesting one. Oregon at 6, right? They're taking on Washington, and Washington has, I think they're 3 losses, 8-3 at this point in the season. If the Huskies pull off the upset here of number 6 Oregon, does it drop Oregon far enough? Does it drop them behind Utah? It certainly adds to the chaos, but I'm not sure that Oregon would fall that far. Similar story with Ole Miss, right? It's right on that borderline of a pretty bad loss to Mississippi State this weekend would do damage, but would it be enough to move them behind Utah? And I'm just not sure that it is. So this is where I think you need to see the divide. And you can throw Oregon, you can throw number 6 Oregon, number 7 Ole Miss in this as well. You probably want the top 4, top 5 to take care of business this weekend, but there's this divide that you need within the top 15 to take place. And Oklahoma taking on LSU, it's go Tigers. Obviously, Oklahoma has added a couple of really quality wins over Alabama and Missouri the last couple of weeks. A loss to LSU though, it may not negate all of that. It may not cancel out all that, but it certainly does some damage. And I think it's a loss to LSU, given what LSU has been this season. I think it would be enough to put them just behind Utah. Notre Dame, obviously at number 9, taking on Stanford, a loss to Stanford. I think that puts them behind Utah with a loss. Alabama taking on the Auburn Tigers in the Iron Bowl. This game has delivered some pretty exciting moments over the years, and I think Utah fans, again, it's War Eagle, right? You're looking for chaos here. A loss, I think, does put Alabama behind Utah. BYU, talking about the Big 12 title scenario, you need a Texas Tech loss and a BYU win. But if we're talking about what helps your at-large bid chances the most, it's Texas Tech take care of business, and it's BYU actually losing to UCF. So it's go Golden Knights. Then you've got Miami, and this is an interesting one because you've got the ACC and you still need to kind of clear the pathway for Utah to move up, and you don't just want as many teams out of the way as you can get, right? So it's go Pitt this weekend. Miami traveling up to Pittsburgh to take on the Panthers, and that obviously with the ACC and the auto bid, it's certainly something to consider. But I think we're focused on getting teams out of the way of Utah's path to move up to number 10. I think that's where they get to secure an at-large bid. So you need at least a couple of 2 to 3 losses in that 8 to 12 range, right? And then you also need a little bit more action behind Utah in the top 25. Vanderbilt taking on number 19 Tennessee. With Vanderbilt, the possibility of adding a top 20 win against Tennessee on the road, no less, that would be pretty significant and move the Vanderbilt Commodores up, in my opinion, ahead of Utah. So, this weekend, I think it's go Vols. You don't. I think a top 14 win for Tennessee on their home field doesn't do as much as a number 19 win on the road would do for Vanderbilt. I think it would certainly move Tennessee up, but I don't think it would do enough to move them ahead of Utah. So you're looking at Tennessee to take care of business there. With USC, I think they're not much of a threat with UCLA being the opponent this weekend. But given it's USC, it's go Bruins. And then again, like I talked about earlier, State, the top 20, Arizona State and Arizona, it's a top 25 matchup with number 20 Arizona State and number 25 Arizona. You want Arizona State to win that one because it improves your best resume win and it diminishes the strongest argument against that win. So I think that's kind of the key this weekend. You're looking for a bit of a divide in the top 25. You're looking for chaos. And I think there's certainly there's a lot of potential for that to happen. So that's what we're looking for. I've got the rooting guide up on KSL Sports. You can go read it. Please do. And then, yeah, let's stop talking college football playoff and let's get to my conversation with Jon Kirby of JayhawkSlant.com. And joining me now on the Utah Blockcast, Jon Kirby, publisher of Jayhawk Slant, part of the On3 uh, website. John, I appreciate you hopping on, man, taking some time to talk some Kansas Jayhawk football.
Absolutely, Steve. Appreciate you having me on.
Definitely. So, obviously looking forward to this game. Friday morning tilt. Not too often you get to see those in college football. But I think this is an interesting matchup, for Utah. I think Kansas has been one of those teams that have been, fairly pesky this year. They've got a quarterback that I really like in Jalon Daniels. I see a lot of similarities between, him and Devin Dampier and how they sort of operate. But, John, I'd be curious just to kind of get your thoughts on the season overall for the Jayhawks and what Lance Leipold has done for the program this season.
Well, Steve, listen, it's been a disappointment, and you can see it social media, listening to radio shows, go on our message board. We got quite a few subscribers who follow the program, and I guess when you ask what Lance Leipold's done for the program, this is what he's done. He's raised expectations to where now that when you're at Kansas and you're 5-6 and you're going into the last game needing a win to get in a bowl, now Kansas fans look at that as maybe somewhat of a disappointment or a down season. Whereas when he took over, there were people that would have said, boy, if we could get 5, 6, 7 wins every year and go to 2 bowl games out of every 3 years, that'd be amazing, because Kansas football, man, from about 2009 to 2022, I mean, it was in the doldrums. So I think this team and the season, I want to say Vegas had them at 7.5 was the win total to start the year. So, it's been underperforming. But like I said, the good and bad of it is that it is underperforming at 5 wins, which at some point not long ago, that wouldn't have been a down season, but now it is. So, they've got a lot of seniors. I think there's 33 seniors walking. So get your coffee ready on Friday morning.
Gotcha.
The senior walk will be quite a while. So, like I said, there's 33 of them.
Yeah.
And listen, Steve, and we're in this age now with this portal and everything.
Pretty unique.
Kansas had to replace over half their scholarship players. So I
Wow.
mean,
Yeah.
and I mean, they're not unique in that way, but it's just been one of those seasons with a lot of ups and downs.
What would you say? So, I obviously Leipold has done a great job to sort of raise the floor for the program. What do you feel is missing for this Jayhawk program, or holding them back from taking that next step? Being that 8-9 type of line, 8.5. Where we're talking about over and under. What's holding this Jayhawk program back?
Well, honestly, it's like these last 3 or 4 minutes of football games, and this goes back to last year, where Kansas was expected to be really good last year. I want to say last year before the season started, ESPN's projections came out, and they had Kansas as the slight favorite to be in the Big 12 title game.
Yeah.
But they lost last minute games with the ball in their hand to win the game. They lost to West Virginia. They lost to Illinois. They lost to UNLV. Arizona State. They had Arizona State beat last year in Tempe. There are so many games that have slipped away in the final 2 minutes this year. They had Cincinnati beat. They had Arizona down in Arizona. So it's one of these weird things. I said until last week going to Ames, Kansas has only really played one bad football game all year, and that was to Kansas State. Okay. And that's the game they couldn't afford to be bad, and they were. But that was really the only bad game that they played. They got beat up at Texas Tech. But listen, Texas Tech can do that to a lot of people. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
when
they
you look
can.
at Kansas and what they've done now, last week wasn't a great performance up in Ames. That was a 3.5 point spread. There were a lot of people, including everybody on our site, was pick the Jayhawks in a mild upset, and they got beat up in Ames. So when you ask me what it is, it's these super close games that it seems like it built up last year and it's carried over to this year, that they just haven't found a way to finish them out. Listen, they're at Missouri. They're on the road at Missouri this year, and they've got the ball in their hands with a
Yeah.
chance to take the lead with 4 minutes to go. So there's been a lot of games that they've let slip away.
Yeah, I remember that Kansas Missouri game. I had Kansas picked. I thought The Jayhawks were playing with a lot of good momentum going into that game, and yeah, unfortunately that one fizzled at the end. So would be curious, John, your thoughts. How would you describe sort of the identity of this Jayhawk offense with Jalon Daniels at the helm?
Oh boy, that's a great question. Look, here's what they want. Here's what they call it. They call it multiple because Jalon Daniels, when he's been at his best in his career at KU, Steve, they put in an offense back in 2022, 2023 that really kind of goes around his skill set,
Hmm.
and they introduced the option, the QB run game, and a lot of things that really kept teams off balance. It's kind of strange because I don't think we've seen a lot of that this year. We haven't seen a lot of the things that I think plays to what he does well. And what's even more interesting about that is they brought Matt Lubick back on staff, who was the coach who came in as an analyst a couple years ago and helped them install a lot of that because he knew how to do it.
Mm.
And now he's back on staff. So I told everybody before the season, hey, you're going to see the old KU offense that Jalon Daniels really thrived in, and we just haven't seen it. And when you ask me what offense it is, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if you'd call it. It's not pro style. Okay,
Yeah.
it's not a true running game, and they call it multiple, and I guess that'd be the best name for it.
Who are the guys around Jalon Daniels then that he's relying on to obviously produce in the run game, in the passing game? Who are the guys that help him in finding success on offense?
Yeah, well, start in the backfield. Daniel Highshaw is a physical runner, and he's run well
Yeah,
lately. And
he's
he's
tough.
not, yeah, he's not a guy that goes down on first contact rarely
Yeah,
at all. And then behind him, they've got LaShawn Williams, who I thought he's looked fairly explosive here lately. Both of them have battled injuries, and this is like the first time here in the last couple games that they've both been on the field together healthy. So listen, Williams came from Iowa. He led Iowa in rushing in 2023. So I mean, when you lead Iowa in rushing, you're not a bad
yeah,
back at all. And then
yeah,
he's got some receivers. Emmanuel Henderson's a speedster who transferred in from Alabama, and Cam Pickett's a playmaker who came in from Ball State, and they got a couple other guys. I mean, he's got targets to spread the ball out to. So I've always said when you watch Kansas on film and you're a defensive coordinator, you sit there and say, oh, man, if these guys get everything going and they get this option game going and the QB run game and they start throwing the ball, I mean, they're going to be tough to prepare for because they make you do so much, but we just haven't really seen it on all cylinders since really maybe the Cincinnati game.
gotcha. That's interesting. I'd be curious to your thoughts on the defensive side now as well. I feel like you mentioned sort of the roster turnover this offseason that Kansas had to replace about half their roster. And it felt like there were some good additions made on that defensive side of the ball. Have you seen sort of the return on investment through the transfer portal? And has the defense been able to do enough to keep Kansas State, in these games? Have they gotten the stops they needed to at times? How would you describe this defensive unit for the Jayhawks?
Yeah, they just haven't got the stops when they've needed it. I mean, Arizona, they're trying to get a stop and win the game and they don't do it. And they've got, Cincinnati, they don't get the stop. Cincinnati converts a 4th and 10 with under 2 minutes to go. Guy makes a one-handed catch, keeps the drive going, and Cincinnati goes down and scores. It ends up being the game winner. So the defense, and I'll tell you, when I look at Utah, this is a concern for KU. They have struggled against the run.
Mm.
And when you've got Utah coming to town, you'd better do everything you can to fix those gap problems and everything that they've had in the run game, or it's going to be a long day. So, when you ask about the portal, it's such a crapshoot because they
Yeah.
had to replace so many guys. But the one thing that they had to replace that was going to be tough, and everybody knew, they had two corners in Mello Dotson and Kobe Bryant that
Yeah,
had
those
been
guys were good.
they were 3 and 4 year starters. So
Yeah.
that, replacing that secondary has been tough. I think they're athletic at linebacker. I know Bengali Kamara is a kid that's got the talent. When you look at the PFF scores, he's struggled a little bit in tackling. And on the interior of their D line, I mean, they're deep. They rotate 5 guys. And when they
Mm.
do that, there's not a lot of drop off between 1 and 5. I mean, they have confidence that they can play 5 different guys 20 to 30 snaps a game and don't feel that there's a drop off. The defensive end spot's been interesting because they just haven't gotten to the quarterback very much. Now they're doing some different things. They're dropping D ends into pass coverage more, but you just haven't seen in what's supposed to be a 4-3 defense. Usually those two guys on the edges are pass rushers, and
Yeah.
you just haven't seen a lot from them.
With that, it feels like, there's still some playmakers, some guys to be mindful of. How do you feel about this defense and how it might attack this Utah offense? Obviously, it all starts with stopping the run, but how do you feel like who can step up to make the sort of plays Utah will or Kansas will need to make it, a competitive matchup?
Well, to stop Utah, I mean, you're going to need all 11 because man, they have more ways to move the football on the ground. When I watch them, I'm like, geez, they just keep coming up with more ways to do it. So you got to be good in the safety game. Okay, so Lyric Rawls and Taylor Davis have got to play some of their best games, and flat out the linebackers have got to play. And Trey Lathan is a transfer from West Virginia. He was third on West Virginia in tackles. He was second on for tackles for a loss. He's come in and he's had a real good season. He's probably been the best defensive player
Yeah.
maybe on the field this year. So the linebackers have got to make tackles and be where they need to be against Utah, because I'm telling you, you get one step or one bad move out of place against Utah and you're going to be looking at the back of somebody's jersey.
And then, on the other side of the ball, I didn't ask you this before we transition to defense, but how do you feel like Kansas can exploit this Utah defense, which is obviously, reeling after two, performances the last 2 weeks of giving up 500 yards through the air to Baylor, then also almost 500 yards on the ground to Kansas State. How do you feel like Kansas, feels about this matchup offensively and how they might attack this Utah defense?
Well, something that I saw Kansas State do is they were bringing in a tight end in the backfield, and
Yeah.
they were creating like an extra blocker in the gap, and Utah was having trouble plugging those holes. Well,
Yep.
a couple weeks ago, Kansas started this deal, and it wasn't because of knowing what Kansas State was going to do to Utah. It was just kind of what they decided to do. They've got a sixth offensive lineman. His name's Nolan Gorsica. He's actually the highest graded offensive lineman right now,
Hmm.
according to the PFF grades, but he doesn't start. But he's been coming in and playing. I call it a sixth offensive lineman. They call it a tight end, but really he comes in motion and he's an extra blocker. So after watching Kansas State last week, I think Kansas will try to come out and mimic maybe what Kansas State did and find out if Utah is adjusted and try some of the same things. Here's the difference. I think Kansas State up front is strong. I think they're physical on their offensive line, and Kansas found that out because Kansas State pushed them around. So people have said, hey, why don't you just go do what Kansas State did? Well, the problem is you probably don't have the physicality up front to do exactly what Kansas State did. And they did it to Utah all game.
Yeah. Yeah, they did. Yeah. It was really interesting watching that game. So that'll certainly be something that I think Utah needs to be prepared for, because I do think, Kansas with that option attack and Jalon Daniels and those running backs, if they get that physicality, up front in the trenches, there's avenues for Kansas to exploit this Utah defense. So, John, I appreciate the insights. Obviously with it being Thanksgiving week, would be curious your thoughts on sort of the Thanksgiving atmosphere there in Lawrence around the program and all of that. Just how do you feel, the team is going to handle sort of this unique setup of, we have a Friday morning game and coming off the day after Thanksgiving. Just how's Thanksgiving looking in Lawrence, Kansas?
Well, Steve, you bring up a very interesting question. And, this game after Thanksgiving hasn't been something that's happened a lot at KU. And with the struggles that we've seen, all the students are headed home on break. So
Gotcha.
the question's going to be is how many of them get back to Lawrence for that early game. And I don't know if you've looked at the weather, but I think they're calling for low 40s for the high. So you're probably
Whew.
going to have a chilly Friday morning. So the players are going to be ready. Okay. It's senior day. They're going to be ready. And
Yeah.
Steve, when you're in, you'll have to take a look around at the new stadium. They're going to knock down the east side after the conclusion of this season.
Oh wow.
But the west side and the new stadium that's been built, some people say it might be the nicest college football stadium in the country right now with
All right.
all the new technology, and it's a beautiful stadium.
Well, I was gonna send you off with that last one, but I'd be curious. Like, obviously, Kansas is well known for its basketball program, right? His national type of program, worldwide recognition. The Jayhawk logo is well known worldwide for being, a basketball program. But it does feel like the last couple of years there's been a greater investment in football. Like, what have you seen from Kansas fans and the program in general? And how optimistic are you for the future of Kansas football?
Yeah, I'm optimistic because they're putting $800 million in this
Oh,
football stadium. I mean, this is, like I said, when this thing's done, it's gonna have a fighting chance as one of the nicest venues in America. So
wow. Yeah.
they've gotten behind it, and they're supporting football, and they know the importance of it. So it kind of makes things tough because Lance Leipold has elevated things to where people now see 5-win seasons as disappointment. So, they've got the new offices, new weight room, new facility, the new practice facilities, maybe 5 years old. I can't remember how, but it's a very nice place. So, I mean, they've got it going on facility wise.
Awesome, Jon. Great stuff. Appreciate you hopping on. Let the people know where they can find you and kind of consume the content this week.
Yeah, absolutely. We're at jayhawkslant.com, and that's the word SLANT. A lot of people say, yeah, I typed in the slant after Jayhawk, and no. So you got to spell it out. But yeah, we'd appreciate anybody that's stopped by.
Awesome, Jon. Appreciate you again for hopping on. Looking forward to meeting up out there in Lawrence and looking forward to the game Friday morning.
Sounds good, Steve. Thank you very much.